Welcome to day 3 of revising previous year question paper and essay. So let's get started with GS1 2025. And I'm already done with question 1 to 10. So I will start with question number 11 and I will do like 5 questions of GS1, 5 of GS2 and then essay. Let's get started. Mahatma Jyotirao Phule's writings and efforts of social reforms touched issues of almost all subaltern classes. Discuss. Now this is a 250 marks question. 250 words question. Mahatma Jyotirao Phule 1827 to 1890 was a pioneering radical social reformer whose intellectual framework and activism directly targeted the multi-layered oppression faced by India's subaltern classes, encompassing Shudras, anti-Shudras, women, and marginalized peasants. Addressing the plight of subaltern classes, critique of Brahminical hegemony. In his seminal work, Gulamgiri, Phule exposed the ideological enslavement of lower castes, comparing it to American slavery. He utilized historical subversions, reinterpreting Hindu mythology to project indigenous Bahujans as the rightful masters of the soil. Emancipation of women. Recognizing gender as a core subaltern vulnerability, Phule and his wife Savitribai opened India's first indigenous school for girls at Bhidewada. He championed widow remarriage and established the Bal Hatya Pratibandhak Graha to protect vulnerable pregnant widows from societal infamy. Agrarian advocacy. In Shet Karachya Asud, the whipcord of the cultivator, he offered a poignant economic analysis of how British revenue systems combined with upper caste moneylenders systematically impoverished the lower caste peasantry. Institutional mobilization. He founded the Satyashodak Samaj to dismantle caste structures, completely rejected priestly intermediaries, and instill self-respect and legal literacy among the lower strata. Phule actively supported the organization of working class, backing Narayan Meghaji Lokhande in establishing India's first labor union for mill workers. Phule's historic subaltern approach uniquely linked gender, caste, and class exploitation, laying the intellectual bedrock for subsequent Ambedkarite and modern socio-political empowerment movements in India. Traced India's, traced India's consolidation process during early phase of independence in terms of polity, economy, education, and international relations. Emerging from the trauma of partition and colonial exploitation, India's early post-independence phase required, required a multidimensional consolidation strategy to forge a resilient sovereign nation state. Consolidation, it consists of three, like polity, economic, four actually: polity, economy, education, and international relations, which is asked in the question. So polity is integration and constitution. 5-year plans we have in economy, Nehru Mahalanobis plan also. Education, IITs, UGC, international relations, NAM, and Panchsheel. Okay, the process of consolidation. Let's see all of these in detail. Detail as per 250 marks, 250 words. The process of consolidation. Polity under Sardar Patel's decisive leadership. Over 560 princely states were integrated into the Union. The adoption of the Constitution 1950, we all know, institutionalized a democratic republic with universal adult suffrage. Furthermore, the States Reorganization Act 1956 successfully diffused subnational anxieties by restructuring states on a linguistic basis. Economy. Facing acute poverty, India adopted a mixed economy framework via the Planning Commission The Mahalanobis strategy, the second plan, prioritized heavy industrialization and public sector units, the temples of modern India, alongside massive multi-purpose river valley engineering projects like the Bhakra Nagal Dam. Education. To build a self-reliant knowledge economy, the government established the University Grants Commission based on the Radhakrishnan Commission. Foundational templates for technical and managerial excellence were laid through the creation of the Indian Institute of Technology and the Atomic Energy Commission under Homi Bhabha. International relations. Reaffirming sovereignty, Jawaharlal Nehru championed the non-aligned movement to avoid Cold War bloc politics. Guided by Panchsheel, the five principles of peaceful coexistence, India positioned itself as a major anti-colonial voice of the global south. This comprehensive consolidation transformed a fragmented improvised colony into a structural unified democratic polity, demonstrating that diverse socio-economic ecosystem could cohere into a singular national identity. The French Revolution has enduring relevance to contemporary world. Explain. The French Revolution 1789 was not merely a localized European insurrection. It was a watershed historical rupture that shattered absolute monarchies and introduced the ideological vocabulary defining modern global democracy. Enduring relevance to the contemporary world. Universalization of democratic ideals. The triumvirate of liberty, equality, and fraternity remains the foundational ethical framework for modern democratic constitutions, prominently embedded within the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Popular sovereignty and constitutionalism. The revolution permanently shifted the locus of political power from divine right monarchies to the citizens. It codified the rule of law through the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, anticipating modern international human rights declarations. Secularism. There is this French word, I don't know how to pronounce it, but maybe like laïcité, something like that. By challenging the structural authority of the Catholic Church, the revolution initiated the systematic separation of state and religion. This model continues to influence contemporary debates surrounding state secularism and civil laws globally. Rise of the nation state. It transformed traditional subjects into modern citizens bound by a common national identity, giving birth to modern nationalism and the geopolitical structure of the contemporary world order. Dismantling of structural privilege. The destruction of feudal privileges laid the early historical precedent for modern welfare state to pursue socio-economic distributive justice and progressive taxation. So here is the flow diagram. You can see like French Revolution roots, liberty, equality, anti-feudalism, anti-clericalism, and modern global governance elements, fundamental rights, rule of law, social justice, and all. The French Revolution remains an ongoing historical project. It unresolved tensions between individual liberty and social equality continue to inspire contemporary global struggles for human rights and democratic preservation. Oh, what just happened? Question 14. Give a geographical explanation of the distribution of offshore oil reserves of the world. How are they different from the onshore occurrences of oil reserves? Offshore oil reserves account for roughly 30% of global oil production. Their geographic distribution is strictly governed by specific paleogeographic and geological anomalies associated with passive continental margins and shallow marine basin. This is the diagram you can see if you want. Oh, geographical explanation of offshore distribution. Offshore reserves are predominantly concentrated within wide, shallow continental shelves where ancestral marine organisms accumulated under anoxic conditions. The Persian Gulf, the world's richest offshore zone, formed by structural traps created by the ongoing collision of the Arabian and Eurasian plates. Example, Safania Field. The North Sea, a classic rift between the UK and Scandinavia, featuring highly productive deltaic sandstone reservoirs. The Gulf of Mexico, characterized by extensive salt dome tectonics that create ideal structural traps for hydrocarbon migration. Atlantic margins, prominently found along pre-salt deep water basins of Brazil and the oil-rich Niger Delta province. Differences offshore and onshore. We have like three parameters you can say. Attribute offshore onshore geological origin, predominantly marine organism in shallow continental shelf platform, in onshore blended terrestrial and lacustrine organic matter in inland sedimentary basins. Structural context associated with passive margins, river deltas and rift system. Onshore, found in interior cratonic basin, foothills or thrust belts. Example Assam. Extraction on coast, high capital expenditure, requires specialized deep water platform. Comparatively lower operational cost, technologically straightforward. We have one more, environmental risk. Accidental spills, example Deepwater Horizon, cause catastrophic marine ecosystem damage. Contamination remains localized to soil system and local aquifers. Understanding these distinct geographical profiles is essential for balancing energy security with the ecological safeguarding of vulnerable marine and terrestrial environment. How an artificial intelligence and drone be effectively used along with GIS and RS techniques in locational and aerial planning. Integrating artificial intelligence and unmanned aerial vehicles, that is drones, with geographic information system and remote sensing marks a paradigm shift in geospatial analytics, transitioning planning from reactive mapping to predictive spatial modeling. Drones plus RS sensor, this is a like flow diagram, a high RES spatial data capture. So you can see this, and if you want you can draw. Effective utilization in spatial planning, Persian urban and aerial infrastructure. Drones provide ultra high resolution ortho mosaics, while RS tracks urban sprawl over time. AI algorithm parse this imagery to instantly map illegal settlements, optimized property tax assessments, and select optimal sites for mass transit or green spaces. Rural and agricultural management. Under initiatives like Swamitwa scheme, drones combined with GIS established indisputable digitized rural property boundaries. Concurrently, AI analyzes multispectral RS data to evaluate real-time crop health, optimize irrigation channels, and model local micro watersheds. Disaster resilience and zonation. AI integrates historical RS climatic parameters to generate dynamic models for floodplains and landslide risk. During active disasters, Drones provide real-time situational tracking, allowing GIS engines to plot optimal evacuation corridors and location-specific rescue assets. Environmental conservation planning. AI automatically classifies vegetative changes and coastal erosions trends from satellite feed. Drone enable precise monitoring of localized forest degradation, bioshield health, and illegal sand mining. This technology synergy converts static spatial data into actionable intelligence, fulfilling the Niti Aayog guidelines for data-driven, sustainable urban-rural planning and localized resource optimization. So the 5 questions of GS1 is done. The 5 questions are done, and now I will jump to GS2. But first, let me have some water. Okay, so let's get started with GS2. Question 11. Constitutional morality is the fulcrum which acts as an essential check upon the high functionaries and citizens alike. In view of the above observation of the Supreme Court, explain the concept of constitutional morality and its application to ensure balance between judicial independence and judicial accountability in India. First thing first, if you are preparing for this exam, this question on constitutional morality, they asked it like multiple times in the previous year, and recently they asked it again in 2025, that is last year. Who knows, they might ask this time as well, or maybe in 27. Constitutional morality. Constitutional morality refers to a core ethical framework that prioritizes constitutional values such as the rule of law, justice, liberty, and institutional checks and balances, and over raw political power or changing social majoritarian views. This is the diagram. Like constitutional morality, we have in judicial independence, judicial accountability, and the balance. Strict adherence to Article 124, 217, and 142. Application to balance independence and accountability. Now, safeguarding judicial independence under Article 50, like that is separation of powers. Constitutional morality demands that the executive respect the judiciary's autonomy. Under Article 50, that is separation of power, constitutional morality demands that the executive respect the judiciary autonomy. It protects judges from political interference in appointments and tenure, ensuring they can rule impartially without fear of retaliation. Look, we are revising the previous year question answer, and we have to work according to what is written in the constitution. But the fact is, this is something like a sugar coating, you can say, because the judges are independent. There is no doubt about it. The judiciary is independent. I do not think any institution is more independent than judiciary. Like they means what do you think, that are they afraid of impeachment or removal? It is practically means it is possible, practically impossible. It is written in the constitution there is a process for removal of judges, but it is practically impossible to remove them, right? So I don't know why, but we have to follow this. So let's talk about this only. So they are saying that safeguarding judicial independence. So under Article 50, constitutional morality demands that the executive respect the judiciary's autonomy, which they do. It protects judges from political interference in appointments and tenure, ensuring they can rule impartially without fear of retaliation. Enforcing judicial accountability. True independence cannot mean absolute unguided power. Constitutional morality requires the judiciary to remain accountable to the text and spirit of the Constitution. Judges must avoid overreach, respect the constitutional separation of powers, and follow clear objective standards in their rulings. Balancing via institutional restraint. Constitutional morality guides the Supreme Court to balance its power of judicial review with judicial restraint. In cases like Navtej Singh Johar and Justice K.S. Puttaswamy, the court demonstrated how this principle can expand citizens' rights while keeping its own powers properly within the constitutional framework. Administrative transparencies. It pushes the judiciary to adopt clearer administrative processes such as implementing institutional guidelines for case allocation and establishing a structured code of conduct mechanism for judicial behavior. Constitutional morality serves as an essential institutional guide, ensuring the judiciary remains independent enough to defend individual liberties while remaining accountable to democratic framework. Question 12. Indian Constitution has conferred the amending powers on the ordinary legislative institutions within a few procedural hurdles. In view of this statement, examine the procedural and substantive limitations on the amending power of the Parliament to change the Constitution. Article 368 of the Indian Constitution grants Parliament the authority to amend constitutional text. However, this power is balanced by specific procedural steps and substantive legal boundaries to protect the democratic core of the Republic. Parliament's amending power. This is the procedural limitations of Article 368, like a special majority requirement, half state ratification, no joint sitting provision, and substantive limitations like basic structure, doctrine, judicial review, Minerva Mill case, limited amending capacity. Now, procedural limitations. Special majority requirement. An amendment bill must be passed in each house of parliament by a majority of the total membership and a two-third majority of members present and voting, preventing a simple ruling majority from making a unilateral changes. No joint sitting provision. And Article 368 requires independent approval from both the houses. If a disagreement occurs between the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, the bill fails, ensuring regular legislative checks. State ratification for federal clauses. Amendments affecting federal structures such as Article 54, 55, 73, 162 or the 7th schedule require additional ratification by at least half of the state legislature. Prior presidential assent. Unlike ordinary legislation, the president cannot give a validly passed constitutional amendment bill for reconsideration and must give assent. Substantive limitation. The basic structure doctrine. Established in Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, the Supreme Court ruled that the Parliament cannot alter or destroy the essential features of the Constitution, such as democracy, secularism, or federalism. Judicial review. In Minerva Mills versus Union of India 1980, the court reaffirmed that judicial review is a basic feature, meaning Parliament cannot use amendments to insulate its actions from judicial scrutiny. This is the expansion of power, by the way, of the court. No self-expansion of power. Parliament cannot expand its limited amending power into absolute unrestricted legislative authority. These combined procedural and substantive limits prevent a temporary legislative majority from undermining the foundational democratic identity of the nation. Discuss the evolution of collegium system in India. Critically examine the advantages and disadvantages of the system of appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court of India and that of the USA. This is the second question in comparison of India and USA. Even in this paper, earlier in 150 words, they asked a same question related to USA and India, right? Not same means they were asking like the pardoning powers of the Indian president and American president, but the theme is same. That is India and USA, which they always ask. If sometimes they ask USA, France, London, England, like that. So this is the second question related to USA in the same paper. The Indian collegium system evolved through a series of judicial interpretations known as the three judges case, 1982 to 1998. This process shifted the primary authority for judicial appointments from the executive to a collective body of senior judges to preserve judicial independence. Evolution summary. The first judges case, 1982. These cases are important. Maintained executive primacy, interpreting consultation as not binding. The second judges case, 1993, established in collegium, ruling that consultation means concurrence. Third judges case, 1998, expanded the collegium to include the Chief Justice of India and the four senior most judges. Comparative critical examination. Country, these are country like India, USA, and advantages and disadvantages. Ensure autonomy, minimizes effective overreach. What is the advantage of collegium in India? So it ensures autonomy, minimizes executive overreach and political interference in appointments. Expert selection, relies on senior peers best positioned to judge professional competence. Disadvantages. Lack of transparency, operates via closed door discussion without public minutes. System nepotism, criticized for creating a self appointing system lacking diverse social representation. USA. What are the advantages of USA executive plus Senate? Democratic oversight, balances power. The president nominates and the Senate confirm the judges. Public scrutiny, public confirmation hearing, ensures open vetting and accountability. Disadvantages, hyper politicization. Ideological battles often lead to partisan appointments aligned with political parties. Tenure security risk. Lifelong terms can be locked in institutional biases across political cycles. What do you think, guys? आपको क्या लगता है कि कौन सा सिस्टम इसमें बेहतर है? देखो, मैं ये बात को सपोर्ट नहीं करता, मतलब मैं चाहता हूँ कि ऐसा और यूएसए जैसा सिस्टम हो। अब आप बोलोगे कि भाई उसमें ये जो हाइपर पॉलिटिसाइजेशन वाला पार्ट है कि ये इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाएगा। अगर जजेस की अपॉइंटमेंट्स गवर्नमेंट के हिसाब से ही होगी तो ये वाला पार्ट ज़्यादा हो जाएगा, मतलब गवर्नमेंट अपने हिसाब से जजेस बिठाएंगी। तो वो तो आप ये बात तो पब्लिक में होती है ना कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट को गवर्नमेंट करती है, आर्म ट्विस्ट करती है उनका। अभी भी कर ही रहे हैं, जब ये वाला सिस्टम है तब भी कर ही रहे हैं, ऐसा मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, ऐसा पब्लिक बोलती हैं। तो वो वाली बात तो फिर नलीफाई हो गई ना कि हाइपर पॉलिटिसाइजेशन होगा। बट अगर आपका इस वे में आपका अपॉइंटमेंट्स होंगे जजेस के, तो ये जो चीज़ हो रही है लैक ऑफ ट्रांसपेरेंसी एंड नेपोटिज्म, ये गारंटेड कम होगा भाई, ये गारंटेड कम होगा। ये हाइपर पॉलिटिसाइजेशन आप रोक नहीं पाओगे, आप चाहे इस मेथड से जाओ या इस मेथड से जाओ। गवर्नमेंट पावर में है और अगर स्ट्रांग गवर्नमेंट है तो वो कर सकती है उनको आर्म ट्विस्ट। लेकिन अगर गवर्नमेंट की वजह से, मतलब गवर्नमेंट एज इन नॉट पार्टी इन पावर, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द पार्लियामेंट, अगर पार्लियामेंट अपॉइंट करेंगे जजेस को, तो ये जो लैक ऑफ ट्रांसपेरेंसी और सिस्टम नेपोटिज्म हो रहा है, इसको आप ख़त्म कर सकते हो भाई, इसमें कोई शक नहीं है, ये हो सकता है। आप लीडर ऑफ अपोजिशन को उस कमेटी में बिठाओ, आप सिर्फ ऐसा नहीं ना कि एग्जीक्यूटिव मिलके जजों को सिलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, पूरा पार्लियामेंट इन्वॉल्व करो ना उसमें। लीडर ऑफ अपोजिशन है, फिर जो हाईएस्ट पार्टी है अपोजिशन में उनके कुछ मेंबर्स है, ऐसे एक कमिटी बना के उसके हिसाब से आप कर सकते हैं। दैट विल बी अ बेटर वे। उससे यूनानिमस पावर्स नहीं जाती किसी भी एक इंस्टीट्यूशन के पास। इंडिया में ये है, हमारे यहाँ सिस्टम में कैसा है कि आप एग्जीक्यूटिव पे लेजिस्लेचर आई रख रहा है, जुडिशरी आई रख रही है। यूएसए में कैसा है, देखो 3 लेग हैं, एग्जीक्यूटिव, लेजिस्लेचर और जुडिशरी, तो तीनों एक दूसरे पे आई रखते हैं। अगर मान लो एग्जीक्यूटिव कुछ गड़बड़ कर रहे हैं तो लेजिस्लेचर और जुडिशरी आई रखेगी। जुडिशरी अगर कुछ गड़बड़ कर रही तो लेजिस्लेचर और एग्जीक्यूटिव आई रखेंगे। हमारे यहाँ पर कहने को तो है और रखती भी है, और हमारा सुप्रीम कोर्ट मतलब ऐसा भी नहीं है कि अंधाधुंध कुछ भी कर देते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है। मतलब इतना मिसयूज तो नहीं दिखा अभी तक कुछ पावर का, लेकिन कुछ डिसीजन इधर उधर दिखे हैं फिर भी, तो उन पे आई नहीं है। अगर हम सिर्फ आप इम्पीचमेंट को, सॉरी इम्पीचमेंट तो सिर्फ प्रेसिडेंट का होता है, अगर सिर्फ रिमूवल ऑफ जजेस को आप टफ बना के, अगर उनको, आपको लग रहा है कि आपने उस प्रोसेस को इतना टफ बना दिया है कि आपने इसलिए बनाया था उसको कि फ्रीडम से काम करें, तो फ्रीडम तो उनको है, गवर्नमेंट हर जगह आर्म ट्विस्ट नहीं करती, लेकिन हिस्ट्री में कुछ एग्जांपल ऐसे हैं जब कोर्ट को इन्फिल्ट्रेट करने का ट्राई किया था गवर्नमेंट्स ने। बट एनीवे चलो ये सब डिस्कशन छोड़ दें, रिवीजन पे आते हैं। तो बोलना मैं ये चाह रहा हूँ बस कुल मिला के कि अगर आप इस प्रोसेस से, डेमोक्रेटिक ओवरसाइट, इस प्रोसेस से अगर हम अपॉइंटमेंट करेंगे जजेस की, तो उससे ये जो डिसएडवांटेज है कि पॉलिटिसाइज, पॉलिटिकली ज़्यादा हैवी हो जाएगी गवर्नमेंट, जजेस बायस हो जाएंगे और ये सब, ये तो देखो यार भाई अभी भी हो रहा है। अगर आप इस हिसाब से जा रहे हो तो भी ये हो रहा है, तो इसको तो आप रोक नहीं सकते चाहे किसी भी मेथड से जाओ। लेकिन अगर आप इस मेथड से जाओगे तो आप ये चीज़ रोक सकते हो, lack of transparency and system nepotism. Anyway, so we are done with this question, right? While the Indian system protects independence and the US system emphasizes democratic review, India needs structural reforms such as a more transparent secretariat to balance institutional independence with public accountability. Examine the evolving pattern of center-state financial relations in the context of planned development in India. How far have the recent reforms impacted the fiscal federalism in India? Center-state financial relations have transitioned from a central top-down model managed by the Planning Commission to a more rule-based, market-aligned framework governed under Article 280 by the Finance Commission. The centralized era, Planning Commission, top-down, and all this is the flow diagram, and evolving patterns in plant development. During the planned economy era, the central government directed development priorities through the discretionary grants. These often diluted the statutory recommendations of the Finance Commission and increased the financial dependence of state governments on central planning. Impact of recent reforms on fiscal federalism: abolition of the Planning Commission, replacing it with Niti Aayog, removed the centralized discretionary funding model, shifting the responsibility of asset allocation toward cooperative federalism, increased devolution pool. The 14th and 15th Finance Commission expanded the divisible pool of central taxes transferred to states to 42% and subsequently to 41% after the reorganization of J&K, granting states greater financial autonomy over local budgets. Implementation of GST, the Goods and Services Tax, harmonized indirect taxes and created the GST Council under Article 279A. This body provides an egalitarian platform where states hold collective voting power though it limits individual state authority to modify local tax rates independently. Rise of cesses and surcharges. A growing concern is that centers' increased reliance on cesses and surcharges. Since these revenues are not shared with states, they can reduce the actual volume of the divisible tax pool. Recent reforms have strengthened cooperative fiscal structures, but addressing ongoing concern around cesses and ensuring timely revenue settlements remain essential for maintaining balanced federal relations. What are environmental pressure groups? Discuss their role in raising awareness, influencing policies, and advocating for environmental protection in India. Environmental pressure groups are organized collectives. Environmental pressure groups are organized collectives of citizens, scientists, and activists who use non governmental channels to advocate for ecological sustainability, protect natural habitat, and challenge environmentally damaging development plans. The pressure group impact access, awareness, political policy influence, and local advocacy. This is the flow diagram you can see. Now let's see role in raising awareness, influencing policy and advocacy. Grassroots awareness and mobilization. Historically, groups like the Sholi Gram Swaraj Sangh led the landmark Chipko movement, highlighting the direct link between the forest conservation and local livelihoods. Modern digital campaigns such as the Save RA or Save Dehing Patkai initiative effectively engage urban youth and draw nationwide attention to localized ecological challenges. Influencing legislation and policy. Pressure groups use detailed research, public interest litigation, and public pressure to shape state policies. Activism led by organizations like the Narmada Bachao Andolan expanded national resettlement policies, while groups like the Center for Science and Environment regularly push for stricter vehicular emission standards and air quality monitoring frameworks. Advocating environmental protection via courts. These organizations frequently approach the Supreme Court and the National Green Tribunal under Article 21 to enforce the polluter pays principle. Their legal action have successfully halted unauthorized mining in eco-sensitive zones, protected vulnerable coastal areas, and forced industry to treat industrial waste. Environmental pressure groups act as crucial checks on development priorities, ensuring that short-term economic growth is balanced with long-term ecological preservation and social equity. Okay, so I'm done with 55 questions of GS2 as well. So total 10 questions, 5 from GS1, 5 from GS2. Now let's revise the essay and then I will wrap it up. So the essay, Truth Knows No Color. This is the third reading of this essay. In the legal annals of ancient Athens, the drying ground of the Areopagus hosted trials under the bare open sky. The judges sat in absolute silence, deliberately shielded from the theatricality, socio-economic statures, and political affiliations of the accused. The architecture of justice sought a singular transcendental ideal to strip reality of its secondary superficial characteristics so that the bare unvarnished truth could reveal itself. The core of this ancient practice highlights a timeless truth that genuine truth is inherently colorblind. It does not alter its structural nature based on the varying hues of human prejudice, political convenience, cultural variations, or ideological alignments. To declare that truth knows no color is to recognize that objective reality stands completely independent of the subjective lenses through which humanity continuously tries to filter, manipulate, and fragment it. Yet, contemporary global society exists in an era of deep fragmentation marked by structural post-truth realities, hyperpolarized echo chambers, and the weaponization of customized identity. In this environment, the pristine, colorless nature of truth is constantly threatened by political spin, cultural biases, and ideological colorings. Society increasingly encounters a fractured spectrum: my truth versus your truth, red truth versus blue truth, and the nationalistic narrative clashing with universal realities. This fragmentation created a profound human dilemma. When truth is forced to take on a color, it ceases to be truth and degrades into propaganda, prejudice, or selective perception. Therefore, it is essential to re-examine the objective core of truth. We must trace how human history, philosophy, politics, economics, and science have either preserved its colorless purity or suffered deeply by trying to dye it in the temporary colors of opportunistic convenience. Again, I told you in the earlier videos as well that we are in practice, so there that is why I have these kind of headings, right? अभी practice में इसलिए ये सब है. You need not to write these headings in the exam when you write actual essay. It should be like continuous, like in paragraphs only, and no heading and nothing. To understand why truth knows no color, we must first examine its basic philosophical definition. In classical epistemology, truth is defined by correspondence theory, which states that a proposition is true if it matches an objective, independent reality. When the ancient Indian sages declared in the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, truth is one, though the wise speak of it variedly. They were not suggesting that truth changes its nature. Rather, they were pointing out that while human interpretation can be colorful and varied, the underlying truth remains unified and uncolored. The colors belong entirely to the human observer's eye, not to the object being observed. This idea is beautifully illustrated by Plato's famous allegory of the cave. The prisoners chained inside the cave perceive the shifting, colorful shadows thrown upon the wall as the absolute truth. These shadows represent the distorted colors of societal convention, unexamined opinions, and sensory illusions. It is only when a prisoner breaks free and climbs out into the sunlight that they see the world as it actually exists, illuminated by the pure, clear light of the sun. The sun does not color the landscape, it reveals things exactly as they are. In the same way, the pursuit of truth requires a conscious effort to look past the superficial colors of immediate perception to discover the objective principles underneath. Again, you need not to draw all of these, any of these in the real essay. You just need to maintain the flow of the paragraphs, but this is for the understanding. Let's look at the historical dimensions. Throughout history, whenever societies have tried to color the truth to match their prejudices, the results have been disastrous. Totalitarian regimes throughout the 20th century provide clear warnings of this danger. In the Soviet Union, the state rejected traditional genetics because it did not align with the communist ideology. Instead, they embraced proletarian science, led by Lysenko, Trofim Lysenko. This politically colored version of biology ignored objective reality, resulting in terrible agricultural failures and widespread famine that cost millions of lives. The state tried to force biology to follow a specific ideological color, but nature refused to comply, showing that objective truth cannot be bent by political willpower. Similarly, the dark history of colonialism shows how powerful nations colored truth to justify global exploitation. European empires created the pseudo-scientific theory of scientific racism, using distorted biological narratives to claim that white Europeans were naturally superior to other races. This colored truth was used to justify the theft of resources and the subjugation of millions across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. By the time the world recognized this narrative as a self serving lie, centuries of exploitation had already occurred. History shows that whenever truth is dyed in the colors of human arrogance or greed, it leads directly to institutional oppression and human sufferings. The constitutional and judicial imperative. In modern democratic governance, the principle that truth knows no color is built directly into the legal framework. The universal symbol of justice, a blindfolded woman holding a pair of scales, captures this idea perfectly. The blindfold is not a sign of ignorance. It represents a commitment to objectivity. It means justice must not see the race, caste, gender, economic status, or political power of those who come before the court. The law must look past these superficial colors to evaluate the core facts of the case impartially. In the Indian constitutional framework, this principle is anchored in Article 14, which guarantees equality before the law and equal protection of the laws. The Supreme Court of India has consistently protected this colorless standard of truth in the landmark judgments. For example, in the state of Karnataka versus Selvi 2010 case, the court ruled that forcing individuals to undergo narco analysis or polygraph test violates Article 20, Clause 3, that is, protection against self incrimination, and the right to privacy under Article 21. The judiciary emphasized that the search for truth must never use methods that violate human dignity or distort justice, reinforcing that the legal discovery of truth must remain fair, objective, and untainted by administrative overreach. The socio-cultural fabric. In social life, human prejudice frequently tries to dye truth in the specific colors of caste, religion, and community identity. This creates fragmented societal narratives where actions are judged not by what was done but by who did it. This tribal thinking distorts social justice, creating double standards where the exact same action is praised when done by one's own group but condemned when done by an outsider. The life and work of Mahatma Gandhi stood as a powerful rejection of this tribalism. Gandhi centered his entire philosophy on satyagraha, insisting on truth. For Gandhi, truth was not a flexible tool to be altered for political convenience or community bias. He famously stated, "Truth is God," emphasizing that truth is an absolute universal reality that transcends all human divisions. His campaign against untouchability was a direct challenge to the colored prejudices of his era. He argued that the practice of caste discrimination was a deep distortion of the spiritual truth that all human beings share the same divine essence. By anchoring his social and political movements in this unyielding commitment to objective truth, Gandhi showed that true social reform requires stripping away communal prejudices to recognize our shared humanity. The worlds of science and economics provide clear proof that truth exists independent of human opinion. A mathematical equation or a chemical reaction does not change its behavior based on the identity of the person studying it. The laws of physics operates exactly the same way in New Delhi, New York, or Nairobi. When Galileo Galilei looked through his telescope and discovered evidence supporting the heliocentric model, his findings directly challenged the colored religious doctrines of the 17th century church. The church forced him to recant and placed him under house arrest, trying to suppress his discovery. Yet, their actions could not alter the orbit of the earth. As Galileo quietly muttered, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves. The objective truth of the solar system remained completely unaffected by the political and religious preferences of the state. In modern economics, data and structural realities display a similar stubborn neutrality. Inflation, fiscal deficit, and rising unemployment figures do not alter their real world impact to suit a government's political public relation campaign. The Economic Survey of India consistently emphasizes that sustainable development requires looking at economic fact clearly and objectively. If a nation ignores real data or on rural distress or rising economic inequality. No amount of polished rhetoric can prevent the resulting structural slowdown. Market forces and economic realities eventually expose any attempt to color the data, proving that long term prosperity can only be built on a foundation of unvarnished economic facts. In the modern digital age, preserving the colorless nature of the truth has become an increasingly difficult psychological challenge. The rise of social media algorithms has created powerful echo chambers that cater directly to our cognitive biases. These platforms are designed to feed users information that confirms their existing political and social views, trapping individuals in customized realities. In this environment, truth is frequently colored by our emotional preferences. People are drawn to stories that make them feel validated regardless of whether those stories are factually accurate. This psychological vulnerability has fueled the post truth era, where objective facts carry less weight in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Misinformation campaigns deliberately add emotional and political colors to fact to cause social division and political unrest. When public debate becomes a clash between deeply polarized, colored narratives, the shared ground needed for democratic discussion disappears. Trust in vital public institutions like the judiciary, scientific bodies, and independent media erodes rapidly, leaving society vulnerable to manipulation. Navigating this landscape Navigating this landscape requires individuals to develop strong critical thinking skills and the psychological maturity to seek out objective facts even when those facts challenge their personal beliefs. In international relations, the search for truth is constantly complicated by national self interest and geopolitical rivalries. The field of geopolitics is often driven by realpolitik, where powerful nations routinely color the truth to justify their foreign policies. One nation's freedom fighter is frequently labeled by another as a terrorist, and interventions launched in the name of democratization are often transparent covers for securing valuable natural resources or expanding strategic influence. To counter this destructive cynicism, the international community has worked to establish universal frameworks based on objective truth about human dignity. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals represent collective effort to rise above national biases. These frameworks are built on the objective truth that every human being, regardless of nationality, is entitled to fundamental rights, clean water, quality education, and safety from violence. When nations gather at forums like the UN General Assembly or the IPCC Climate Summit, long term success depends entirely on their willingness to face global truth objectively, such as the reality of climate change, rather than viewed through the narrow lens of short term national advantage. To see the truth clearly without the distorting colors of prejudice, ideology, or personal bias is one of the highest achievements of human character. It requires intellectual honesty and the courage to accept reality even when it makes us uncomfortable or contradicts our long-held assumptions. The pursuit of truth is not a passive act. It is an active, lifelong commitment to checking our biases, questioning comfortable consensus, and standing up for objective facts in the face of widespread misinformation. As the world becomes more interconnected yet politically fragmented, protecting the colorless purity of truth is vital for the survival of democratic societies. We must deliberately strengthen our public institutions, safeguard the independence of the judiciary, support free and rigorous scientific inquiry, and cultivate a public culture that values objective evidence over emotional rhetoric. The timeless insight of Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali remains our best guide for the future. A vision of society where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. By keeping the stream of human reason clear and uncolored, we ensure that truth remains the steady, reliable foundation for human progress, justice, and universal unity.